It's time for a bedtime story, and this one I found in a darling antique shop, the Antique Society of Sebastopol. Walt Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. A handsome young prince. A long time ago, in a faraway land, a child was born to the king and queen. The child was named Snow White. She was beautiful and lovely in every way, and she made the queen very happy. Alas, the queen died when Snow White was very young. The king, in due time, married again, but the new queen proved a wicked stepmother. She hated Snow White. But she bade her time. When the king sickened and died, and the little girl no longer had anyone to turn to, her lot became hard indeed. The queen gave orders that the young princess be put to work as a scullery maid. She was made to do hard tasks in the kitchen and pantry. Despite the queen's hatred, and despite her hard tasks, Snow White daily grew more and more beautiful. And a young prince, who chanced by on a journey to find a bride, saw her at work and stopped to watch the beautiful maiden. He came the very next day, then again and again. White knew not that he was a prince, nor did he know that she was a princess. Soon they found themselves in love with each other. So time went on, and in spite of her hardships, Snow White was not unhappy. She dreamed of the handsome stranger who had gone on his way. She dreamed of happy days to come in the future. Now, the queen was very beautiful, and she was proud that nowhere in all the kingdom was anyone more handsome. Each day she appeared before the oracle, who came forward in her magic mirror and asked, "Who is the fairest in the land?" And each day the answer was, "You are the fairest one of all." But one day the oracle in the magic mirror answered differently. No longer was the queen the fairest one in all the land. Snow White was now the most beautiful person in the kingdom. In great rage, the queen summoned one of her hunters to appear before her. Harshly, she ordered him to take Snow White into the deep woods there and slay her. Unsuspecting, Snow White went forth into the woods with the hunter. It was a joyous, lovely day, and Snow White was happy as a lark. In the depths of the wood, she stopped to help a little lost bird, and the hunter drew out his knife to slay her. But his heart failed him. He could not carry out the queen's cruel order. Remorsefully, he bent low before the young princess and begged her forgiveness. He told her of the queen's plot and urged Snow White to hurry far into the woods so that she would be out of danger. Terribly frightened, the girl followed his advice. Never pausing, she hurried onward, hurried blindly, while the hunter returned to the palace. Trees, logs, bushes seemed to be evil spirits pursuing her. At last, she reached a clearing. Friendly little animals and birds hovered about her. Sorry to see her so frightened and unhappy, they made new advances, and Snow White, watching them, found her terror leaving her. She asked them if they knew of some place in the woods where she could stay during the night. Making animal friends. Not far away there lived 7 little dwarfs. Their house was small and strange indeed. The names of the 7 dwarfs were Doc, Happy, Sleepy, Grumpy, Dopey, Sneezy, and Bashful. It was Grumpy who was always the disagreeable one. Nothing was right to Grumpy. Everything was always wrong. At that very moment, he was telling the other dwarfs that something terrible was sure to happen. Danger was stalking them. He did not know that something very strange and different and new was actually to happen. for it was to the house of the 7 dwarfs that the birds and the animals were about to take Snow White. Grumpy's lecture over, the 7 dwarfs made their way to the mine where they toiled each day. So when Snow White and her friends finally reached the dwarf's house, no one was there to greet them. Snow White was delighted at finding the cute little house. She entered timidly, not knowing who might be there. The birds and animals followed her into the house. What an untidy place! Surely, Snow White thought, it must be the home of orphans. With the help of her friends, the birds and the animals, she set straight to work to put the house in order. The squirrels hurried high up into the rafters and cleaned the cobwebs away. Little birds flew into every closet. Some of the animals swept the floors. Others took the clothes of the 7 dwarfs and washed and dried them. And Snow White was the busiest one of all. Downstairs cleaned, candle in hand, she climbed the stairs to the bedroom, and there discovered 7 little beds. Seeing the beds made her realize how very sleepy she was, and she climbed into them. She needed 3 of them on which to stretch her full length. The birds covered her with a blanket as she fell asleep. They put out the light. The echoes of marching feet and songs were heard as the 7 dwarfs were on their homeward way. At the door of the house, they stopped in surprise. Everything was in order. The birds in the rafters, seeing their surprise, mischievously uttered weird cries, and the nervous dwarfs scampered into hiding. Timidly, they came forth again. Doc grew very bold and ordered Dopey to investigate. Hesitating, scared, he climbed the stairs, but paused before the bedroom. Urged on by the others, he entered the room. At that moment, Snow White moved in her sleep, then sat up and yawned. Dopey, in panic, turned and ran out to collide with the others waiting at the door. Snow White's eyes opened wide as she saw the 7 dwarfs. What strange little people, she thought. They looked kind and not wicked. She tried hard to make friends with them, but they held back until she told them that she was a very good cook. Apple dumplings, gooseberry pies. You should see my gooseberry pies. Their eyes sparkled. Only Grumpy held out against her. So, he asked the others, you would sell your lives for a gooseberry pie or apple dumplings, would you, men? Sure, they replied. Grumpy growled. Well, she can stay to bake the apple dumplings and the gooseberry pie. And she did stay, and they grew to love her. She saw to it that they washed, bathed, and kept themselves clean and tidy. Grumpy, who continued to protest and growl over having a woman around, really loved her as much as the rest did. All was well for the time. Snow White was happy in the forest, and in the palace the wicked queen was happy too. She gloated over the death of her stepdaughter until one day when she again consulted her magic mirror to ask, who is the fairest in all the land? The mirror replied that Snow White was the fairest in all the land, and that she lived in the home of the 7 dwarfs. In a great fury, the queen decided to go forth and get rid of Snow White herself forever. Disguised as a witch, with a poisoned apple safely placed in a basket of fruit which she carried, she made her way to the home of the 7 dwarfs, beyond the 7 hills and the 7 valleys. Snow White was alone. And when the old lady knocked and asked for entrance to rest, she could not refuse her. She did not recognize the queen, of course, and tried to make the old witch feel at home. When at last the witch rose to go, she gave Snow White a beautiful apple. Snow White could hardly wait. She bit into the apple and sank immediately to the ground, seemingly dead. A great outcry arose among the birds and the animals, Snow White's friends. As the witch, muttering maledictions, hurried away, some animals and birds pursued her. Others hurried to the mine to warn the 7 dwarfs, who hurried home very quickly. They found Snow White on the floor, dead to all appearances. How they mourned her! They placed her in a beautiful glass casket and kept her there. In this way, they felt they had not lost her completely. What the 7 dwarfs did not know was that Snow White was not dead, but until her true lover came upon her and looked at her and kissed her, she would remain thus, without speaking or moving or even breathing. The lover's kiss was the antidote to the poison in the apple. In his faraway kingdom, the prince, unhappy because he had lost all clues to the beautiful scullery maid who had disappeared, had decided to go forth again in search of her whom he loved. Chance brought him to the home of the 7 dwarfs, where he stopped to rest. There he saw the casket and recognized the damsel whom he loved. And as he gazed at her, he stooped to kiss her. She opened her eyes and sat up with a smile. Happy prince, happy princess, and happy dwarfs, as all the birds and animals were her friends, were also happy. A day or so later, the prince and Snow White departed from the house of the 7 dwarfs, but they promised to come back for a visit every spring. And when Snow White and the prince arrived at his palace, they were married and lived happily ever after. The end.